Hello, and welcome to another Wednesday edition of Midnight Launch News. I'm David, and I'm joined by a special guest.
Hey everyone, this is Pedram.
Hey everyone, this is Pedram. Oh, that queuing was so smooth. Don't worry about it, man. We got there. We totally got there. Dan is on vacation. He is in sunny Florida, sending me all sorts of images of him sitting on the beach, drinking margaritas and daiquiris while I'm here in Dallas, and it's just been raining cats and dogs and terrible weather. And Ozzy, Pedram, I'm just gonna call you Ozzy because that's what I've called you forever.
That's
Can
fine.
you can you believe he had the nerve to send me a message earlier today being like, "Oh, I'm so not ready for my red-eye flight to Florida. Woe is me."
Oh, boo-hoo, first world
Oh,
problems.
my goodness. First world Canadian problems. I'm going to sunny Florida and I have to wake up early to get on a plane. Ugh, Canadians and Canadian problems. Well, Ozzy, today we've got a couple things to talk about. We're going to be covering DRM. We're going to be covering the DMCA. We're going to be covering Destiny a little bit. But we are going to start off with something that I know you will find absolutely exciting, because you were the one that brought it up and said, man, we need to talk about this stuff. The Mythic Dungeon Invitational is back. Ozzy, for people that have no clue what this is, catch them up.
All right, so in World of Warcraft, Mythic Plus is a scaling level dungeon system that becomes progressively more difficult as you complete the dungeon in time. It starts off with just doing a mythic dungeon. It gives you a keystone. That keystone, every time you complete the dungeon in the allotted time, there's certain cutoffs, breakpoints, where if you complete it really fast, it may upgrade the keystone up to 3 times, as little as 1 time, or if you don't complete it in time, it could either downgrade the keystone,
Hmm.
or if you or give you a different keystone altogether.
Right.
Um, as you progressively, as the numbers get bigger, so going from, let's say, a mythic +2 to a mythic +4, the dungeon scales in difficulty, but your timer doesn't change. It's the same amount of time, but everything hits harder, hits faster, and they start to add certain affixes.
Right.
If you're familiar with Diablo, very similar to like the greater rift
The
stones and
Greater
things like
Rift
that.
Keystones, absolutely.
Yeah. So they basically have brought that aspect of kind of making dungeons more difficult and challenging to World of Warcraft, and in an effort to kind of, I feel like, monetize the PvE side of
Hmm.
World of Warcraft, they created the first Mythic Dungeon Invitational, which basically, if you qualified for in teams of 5, you could go in and compete against other people in preset dungeons with preset uh, uh,
Affixes.
affixes. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the winner won, like, the winning team was, it was $100,000 total pool, I think.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, for playing World of Warcraft. Go figure.
Well, and they tried this before. I remember, yeah, it was a long time ago, but probably like 4 or 5 BlizzCons ago. They did like a rating competition where they got some of the top rating teams in the world, put them down in a raid, and saw who could complete it the fastest.
Yeah.
And the PvE portion of World of Warcraft is classically something that has been untapped as far as competitive play is concerned, aside from, server firsts and world firsts, which is something that isn't actually run by Blizzard, that's more run by the community, because PvE doesn't really lend itself to competition, especially competition between teams.
Right. It's
Um,
it's it's the PvP side has been incredibly competitive for a
oh,
really
yeah,
long time.
absolutely.
Arenas? Are you kidding? I mean, it's been a staple at BlizzCon for years and years and years.
Hmm.
It has a really healthy following on Twitch and with different streamers and things like that. but like you said, the PvE side is really untapped up to this point.
Well, I'm excited. I watched a little bit of the original, and the shoutcasters were amazing. The ability to watch both teams, trying to achieve the same goal, but going about it in different ways, was absolutely fascinating. And for the more casual player, and I say more casual player in comparison to these players that are actually in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, so more casual than them, but still relatively hardcore. We got sort of a peek behind the curtain to see what the best teams in the world are doing as far as strategically and what tricks they're using to clear these dungeons, and that was really fascinating.
Oh yeah, I mean, tons of strategies that we never even would have thought about. Not even crossed our minds in a million years that all of a sudden we're seeing this team do. And not only are they doing it, they're executing it perfectly. And we're not talking easy things, like really difficult feats.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, for people who aren't necessarily that avid in the Mythic Plus scene, if you're even just a casual player, the nice thing about the Mythic Dungeon Invitational was it evolved very quickly from as they were developing it. So they have things like damage meters and healing meters on the screen, so you can see not just oh yeah, look, they're just killing mobs, but you can see how much damage they're doing. And even as a casual player, knowing how much damage you do relative to what these guys are doing, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely impressive. It gives you something to shoot for, but at the same time, it's still entertaining without knocking you over the head and making you feel like a terrible player because you can't put out, 2 million single target DPS or so on and so forth. Because you still get to take stuff from that and you still get to learn. And there are ways to improve your play beyond, increasing your DPS. And these shoutcasters will talk about all these little tips and tricks that these teams are using in order to be successful.
Oh yeah, and to be honest, there was stuff, and as someone who does a lot of Mythic Plus dungeoning, I there were things that I would see that the shoutcasters were like, oh hey, yeah, if you don't stop this ability, it's really bad. Because at the lower level keys that I had been doing at the time, it wasn't that bad. But then getting into the higher keys, I learned from that, and I said, oh, I better watch out for these things. So even someone who had a relatively decent amount of experience in them, I still learned a great deal from it.
Right, and you have to, for all of our viewers that haven't done this, we talk about the scaling of the dungeons. We're talking about going from like 0% damage boost at, let's just say, Mythic 0. And then at 10, it's maybe like a 1000% damage boost. Like, it's not a small amount of scaling. Like, there's a ton of increased damage. I don't know if it's necessarily 1,000, but the scaling, it goes up very quickly, and it goes up by a lot. And you get to the point where abilities that you could just ignore consistently, and you're maybe Mythic plus 10 or plus 15, those same abilities are going to start one-shotting you once you get to, and this is what you have to do just to qualify, 5 level 23 Mythic Keystone dungeons. Have you done a 23?
No. I tried a 20, and I'm still looking for my teeth.
Yeah.
They all got kicked out pretty heartily. To put it in perspective, it's roughly about, at just level 15, you're looking at about 280% increase in damage, health, and everything.
Right.
Now, that's not accounting for affixes.
Right.
So if you have something like Tyrannical that increases the boss damage even further beyond that, or you have Fortified, which increases the mob damage beyond that, the trash mob damage and health and everything beyond that, I mean, the numbers get staggering, just like you said. I mean, I could easily see the numbers compounding into the thousands of percents, and you're just and abilities that normally you're like, oh, okay, if I have a defensive ability for this, that's good. If not, I'll be okay. It's no. If you don't have a defensive and everyone is topped off, everyone's gonna die.
And everybody else has a defensive.
Oh yeah.
Like there are times when your entire group needs to use defensives just to survive a single ability. I have not done 23. I certainly haven't done a 23. I think maybe the most I've ever done was an 18 or something like that. I consider myself to be an extremely well-geared and decent player from a mechanic standpoint, but even like these level 23s, these are even beyond me. Like these take a very special and very talented person and group to be able to put together the amount of coordination and the amount of clean mechanical play required to down these dungeons.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the type of person that's been like, oh hey, I've done this on heroic or regular mythic or even mythic 10 or 15, I could certainly do a 23. That's absolutely not the case. As
No,
as you
not.
scale, it really does get to the point where like the most trivial abilities that you don't think about will kill you in one shot. So you can't let anything slip by. And the people that are competing at this level, the really neat thing about it is they have been doing these dungeons so much. They know these dungeons like the back of their hands. They know every turn. They have everything. They have timings down to the second. And so they know exactly what they're doing and how to do it. And to that point, they actually get a practice server that gives them the affixes that they're going to be facing so that they can repeatedly engage in those dungeons so that they can practice them once they've qualified. I mean, the qualifying everyone, it's different. But once
Right.
you've gone through past the proving grounds, you get a special server where you and all of the other people who've qualified for the invitational can really just go at these dungeons over and over and over and over and really just know them at a level that no one else does. And
Right.
it's just amazing to watch.
So, and they've actually released some of the information for the new proving grounds. They've released the modifiers for week 1 and week 2. You've got Raging, Volcanic, and Tyrannical for week 1. And for those of you that might not be familiar with these modifiers, Raging says non-boss enemies, so basically all of your trash, and Rage at 30% health, dealing 100% increased damage until defeated. Volcanic causes enemies to periodically cause gouts of flame to erupt beneath the feet of distant players. So that's something that the ranged have to watch out for. Basically, don't stand in crap. That's sort of a mantra that has always been around from day one. So, and then in Tyrannical, boss enemies have 40% more health and inflict up to 15% increased damage. Week 1 doesn't seem too bad.
No. I mean, Raging is tough, but it's very manageable. Volcanic is almost easy,
Yes.
especially if you have Volcanic tends to favor ranged over melee. So if you just have like a healer, they will all of the Volcanics will typically cluster around the ranged people. So if you have 1 or 2 ranged people like a healer or a ranged DPS, the melee doesn't have to worry about Volcanic at all. Really. I mean,
right. And, a lot of healers can heal on the move these days. I mean, obviously, Resto Druids are extremely capable of doing so. To a lesser extent, Holy Priests can do it. Shamans can do it. Even monks can do it. So, Volcanic, pretty easy modifier. Week 2. Let's talk about week 2. Because week 2 looks absolutely terrible. This is, these are the modifiers where I would just be like, yeah, taking the week off. Sorry guys, I don't need my mythic cash. Teaming, which increases the number of non-boss enemies throughout the dungeon. Explosive, which says when slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer 10% of their max health damage over 4 seconds, and the effect stacks. And to my knowledge, there's no limit to what it can stack up to.
No, you're thinking exploding. It's actually going to be explosive, which is that they spawn bombs.
Oh my!
Which is
that's even
so
worse.
much worse.
That's even worse.
So much worse.
Oh
So
my
imagine
goodness.
this. So explosive, periodically the mobs that you're fighting will spawn little green bombs. These little green bombs have to be single targeted. Like AoE abilities will not affect them,
Right, won't touch
even
it.
if you're single targeting it. So like if you have a swipe ability that is considered an AoE move, even if you're targeted onto that bomb, it won't actually hit it. You have to use single target abilities only. So not only do you have extra trash mobs, but now there's all of these extra trash mobs are dropping bombs everywhere. And if you don't kill them fast enough, they detonate for incredible amounts of
It's
damage.
an absolute targeting nightmare. It can be so terrible. Um, Luckily, we have add-ons that can kind of help us do this.
Yeah.
Are they allowed to use add-ons during
Oh
the
yeah.
Mythic Invitational? Okay, so they can use add-ons.
Yeah, so one of the big kind of things that happened the first time around, which hopefully they've been able to fix, was they had some certain naming conventions where they said, you have to keep the names of all of your tunes the same as you normally have them, because once you qualify, essentially you don't bring your own characters. They give you kind of whatever characters you want with whatever gear you want at whatever
Mm-hmm.
level is the maximum level. They basically max out all of your stats, and they give you whatever race, whatever class you want to play, because if that's available to everyone, theoretically it's an even playing field. um, and so there's an add-on called weak auras, which a lot of people have they have certain weak auras that are tied to their tune names. And in the first Mythic Dungeon Invitational, what happened was people were trying to steal each other's tune names so that they could mess up each other's weak auras, which
Wow.
wasn't cool. It was
Huh.
actually one of the teams got disqualified for that. I think a team either got penalized or disqualified or something like that for that. But yeah, definitely you can use add-ons in whatever you want. You just can't use obviously bots and things like that.
Right, right. So let's see. When did we talk about when it actually starts?
No,
Um,
it's the 27th. February 27th is the first week.
mm-hmm.
Week 2 will begin March 6th.
Okay. And are there going to be more weeks, or is this basically like these are the 2 weeks where you get to qualify, and then after that they go ahead and go through the rankings and decide if you've made it into, sort of past the proving grounds? Do you know?
The way I read it, and again, things could change from now to then,
Mm-hmm.
is you have to put together your team of 5. You have to use the exact same 5 tunes, and you have to complete the 5 dungeons each week. Um,
Oh, okay. That's not how
it's a
I
it's
read
a
it, but that makes
it's a
sense.
total of 5 level 23 Mythic Keystone dungeons over the 2 weeks.
Okay, so you could do 2 1 week and 3 the next week.
I think so,
Yeah, that's a little bit ambiguous.
because I would think, given the affixes that they've been presented with, I can't imagine anyone wanting to do it on week 2. I
Right,
can imagine
neither can
everyone
I.
just knocking them out in week 1 and being like, okay, and then just let week 2 happen.
Yeah. Hmm. That's interesting. I mean, I guess we'll just have to see what happens. Do you have a team that you're rooting for?
I really enjoyed watching it, and mostly from the vantage point of I enjoy the Mythic Plus content to begin with, and so
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're entertaining, I enjoyed watching teams wipe as much as I enjoyed watching them just thrash through the dungeons. So if they keep up the quality production that they did last time, I'm gonna enjoy it no matter what.
I'm gonna go with a bold prediction here.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that a team nobody has ever heard of, from a guild that nobody has ever heard of, is just going to take it all. So it's
Okay.
not going to be Method. It's not going to be any of these other, big name guilds. It's just going to be some group of 5 really close friends that play this game together a lot. And they are just going to absolutely wreck the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. I think that is one of the things that makes this particular contest so special, is that you don't have to be in method to find success. You can just be a group of really close friends that come together, that play all the time, that, know what your friend is going to do even before he does it, and you can find success within this Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
I agree, and I would love to see that, because I think all that would do is encourage more people to try and really focus on this content and kind of keep it going, because I think it's one of the best things that Blizzard came up with for this latest expansion of WoW.
I absolutely agree with that, and it seems like they agree with it because we already know it's coming back in the next expansion, so we can expect it to be a mainstay as far as Mythic Dungeons specifically. For, maybe until World of Warcraft ends, rest in peace. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But talking about video games ending and MMOs giving up to Ghost, I actually covered this in an earlier video, and I wanted to get Ozzy's opinion on it. We were talking about how we have, I guess we would call them video game preservationists these days. And basically, these companies or these groups of people have found ways to get exemptions around the DMCA, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, in order to make lawful reproductions of old video games that are no longer available to be purchased. So, old video games on the Atari, video games that you and I grew up on. Well, maybe you grew up on. Oh,
Definitely.
God, Ozzy's so old.
Whatever, man. Atari's legit.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, back then it was legit.
Back then it was legit. Oh, goodness. What a perfect segue into something we're not going to be talking about today.
It would have been perfect. What could have been?
So basically, what these groups of what these video game preservationists do, and in particular the one we're referring to, they are called MADE, or the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment. It is a building. I think they're located out of California, and they basically have a library of something like 5,500 or 3,500 games available for people to come in and play. They charge $10 for a day of gameplay. So in this way, it's sort of like all these, like barcades that you've seen coming out, where it's just a bar, and in addition to it, it's an arcade, and you go in and you play retro games and so on and so forth. And they have petitioned the U.S. Copyright Office to loosen the restrictions on the DMCA to allow them to essentially reverse engineer server-side code that is required to run now defunct online video games. So we'd be talking about Star Wars Galaxies, Dark Ages of Camelot, all of these older MMOs that are no longer around, that can no longer be played. They want the ability to reverse engineer what these companies had on their servers, to actually run the servers. And then they want to be able to make these quote-unquote reproductions of the video games available to people to play. And oh my goodness, like, this is one of those things that absolutely tears at my heart, because I think it's extremely important that we preserve, at least historically, the projection and the advancements within video games. But at the same time, I feel like what MADE is asking to do is akin to the law saying, yes, you can steal industry secrets, things that were never released to the public. Here, we're going to give you permission to reverse engineer them. What do you think?
I mean, I'm with you in the sense that I've been playing video games as long as I can remember, and I'm all about nostalgia in video games and things like that. But in full disclosure, I am not in the video game industry. I'm not a programmer or anything like that. But I I agree. I feel like they're asking to basically, when you say we want to reverse engineer games, this is not like you're going and asking for permission, like, oh hey, like Mr. or Mrs. Developer, we know that you made this game a long time ago, we have a bunch of really great fans that would love an opportunity to experience this, can we have it? No, no, no.
Right.
They're talking about reverse engineering it. They're like, we're gonna either somehow get your server blades, or we're going to hack your servers or reverse engineer the code or do
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
I don't think
Basically,
that's right.
they're asking permission to break through the the copyright protections
Right.
in
And
order.
once that happens, you're going to see that I feel like video game industry will they'll just stop innovating as much, because you'll see if they innovate some really great new idea and it doesn't work in one of their games, they can hold on to it for another game. But
Exactly.
if they don't, if they say, you know what, I don't know if I want to take a shot with this, because this one particular game with this specific setting may not be that great. It may not work, but I don't want to risk these other guys coming and taking that. And then eventually that becomes what, open source, and so anyone can use it. Like, I don't
Right.
know.
And
It just
so here's that's you touched on something that I absolutely wanted to bring up is I think it's safe to say for most companies and most legacy software, things like assets and the actual code that is run on the video game is something that is sort of a one off. But now you're talking about servers. You're talking about backend. You're talking about something that can be updated and implemented over time on multiple video games. So
right.
I'm not saying that a company is using code, circa 2004 or 1998 to run their most recent online video game. But I'm also not saying that there probably aren't very small vestiges of that code still implemented, or at least ideas from that code still implemented within these backend servers that are running these newer MMOs. And the ability for some company to reverse engineer that, it seems like it could be very, very impactful in a negative way on these companies that are creating these video games.
I agree. I mean, and the reality is, um, take for example the game we were just talking about, World of Warcraft. They're talking about bringing back like the classic servers. Well,
Mm-hmm.
at what point would they be able to like reverse engineer World of Warcraft? Could they say, well, it's been several expansions, we should be able to reverse engineer vanilla? And
Yeah. Well, and
well,
and yeah, I think you can make that argument. You can definitely say vanilla World of Warcraft, that experience that I had is no longer available to me. So that snapshot in time isn't something that I can have without, reverse engineering the code and going the Nostradamus route where you make a private server and so on
right.
and so forth. And we know how that worked out.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, if the video game companies wanted this, like, they wouldn't be fighting against the private servers. They wouldn't be trying to shut them down every chance they get. It's because they're
Hmm.
trying to protect their assets, which is fair. They put a lot of money and time and effort into developing these tools. I mean, like you're saying, you said there's elements from when they first began coding World of Warcraft are still being implemented now. I mean, they just did a silly implementation where they increased the number of bags your backpack had,
Hmm.
which has been the same since vanilla, and it broke WoW for like a few hours.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the code is not it's constantly evolving, but there's aspects of it that are very old. So I don't think you should be able to just give people willy-nilly access and be like, well, okay, that game's been around long enough, we should be able to reverse engineer it.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I don't want to agree with you because I feel like most people would want me to be, want me to say something like, yeah, we have to let them do this because we have to protect our heritage and, the history of video games. We have to try to preserve it. And I think that's true to a certain point, but I think that point ends when the information that you're trying to preserve is not shipped to you on the CD or on the cart that you are trying to preserve it from. If it's something that you can dump from a
Right.
CD or a cart and you can put it on a hard drive, then you can preserve that. But when it comes to something that you have to reverse engineer the code that was never made public in the first place, that was never actually given to you, because this is all run on their servers, wherever, their server farm is, I think that's where I draw the line.
Oh, I agree completely. And I think that allowing people to do that would just cause the industry to retract and say, fine, we're just going to develop much more slowly and more cautiously, and we're not going to innovate as much as we can because we don't want to lose. Why spend that much money developing something if anyone could have it in just a couple years?
Right, or, possibly equally as bad, the video game company and the ESA, which is basically the group of all these giant publishers and developers, comes down hard on this particular subject, and as opposed to, kind of giving a little bit of leeway here and there and saying, well, okay, yeah, we agree, those old Atari, 2006 or whatever it was called back in the day, we're
2600.
to yeah, there you, wow, you are old. Oh, good. As opposed to them basically not fighting against allowing DMCA exemptions. Maybe they do start fighting against it, and maybe where Made is trying to increase the availability of these sort of historical segments or slices of video game history, they actually contract it, because now the ESA is like, well, no, you took it one step too far. All right, we were okay with you pulling stuff from these carts and these CDs, but now you're stealing stuff from us that was never meant to be made public.
Right. And the one thing that kind of caught me off guard about this whole thing was why are they not approaching the developers and saying, "Hey, like you made this game, you still retain the rights to it. This is what we would like to do. We have X number of fans of your product that would love an opportunity to walk through whatever the zone is once again."
Right.
And these are profit driven companies that really need their fan bases. Like, no developer wants to like shun their fans and their followers. So they're why wouldn't they work together unless they absolutely are against it? And if they're absolutely against it, it's their intellectual property. We
Yeah,
have to
it's
draw the
their
line.
right to say no.
Yeah.
And I don't know that going and crying to the U.S. Copyright Office is the way, is a good way to force a company into giving you access to things that they don't want you to have access to. And if I'm honest, I don't even know that I agree with the idea that you can actually, sort of back up or create a historical record of something like an MMO, because I think so much of what makes an MMO so special is the people you play with, and the fact that it is a video game that relies specifically on hundreds of thousands of people playing it together and having those sort of experiences, where if this one company made were to even make Star Wars Galaxies available at the little building that they have. They call it a museum. Um, I don't know that I would call it a museum, but that's what they call it. And if it was just you in a zone alone, like that's not a good representation of what that game was.
No, and how far are you going to get in one day?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah,
realistically, so you pay your $10, you get to play all day. Let's say you devote your entire time to that one game. Like you said, there wouldn't be like a lot of people unless they can fit an arena worth of people in there to actually create that experience. And a part of it, just like you're saying, is part of what makes MMOs amazing is that they're constantly evolving. They're
yeah,
always changing. So to take a snapshot of an MMO at one given point in time isn't really indicative of the entire MMO. Vanilla had multiple patches, multiple updates, so many different changes throughout it. So at what point do you say, okay, well, I like
like, yeah,
classic
this
vanilla
is
WoW
the
at this point.
definitive classic
Right.
experience, right? Exactly. And that answer is going to change no matter who you ask. Everyone's going to have a different answer for that particular question. I think this is something that Made just needs to drop and needs to be like, all right, we're not going to fight this. We put in our request, and hopefully, or at least I hope the Copyright Office will say no. What you have right now is good enough, and then I guess in 3 years they can repetition changes, and we'll see what happens then.
Yeah.
So speaking of DRM, uh, here's something interesting. So you play flight simulators, and you go and you download an add-on. And in this particular case, it's Lockheed Martin's Prepared, which is stylistically spelled with a number 3 as opposed to an E, add-on for Flight Sim. And then you find out that Flight Sim Labs, the people that are distributing this mod or this add-on package, have actually surreptitiously installed malware on your computer in the form of basically what is a keylogger. In this case, a keylogger called Chrome Password Dump. This seems like is something that you would have to make up, and you'd be like, no, that's never gonna happen. No company can be that stupid to do that, but it happened.
Well, it happened like in I want to say like late 90s. There was a big virus that got spread around to computers that ended up getting traced to one of the antivirus company.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard of that these people will almost like create a fire that they're going to end up putting out, or
Oh.
do something really just not smart and think they can get away with it, because people don't remember that their audiences and the people who are active and engaged in software, they are smarter than you would think, and they
Yeah.
catch stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is basically what happened. Is a company called Flight Sim Labs released, like I said, an add-on for Flight Simulator, and within that add-on was a keylogger, and the keylogger, according to them, would only activate if the copy of the add-on that you installed on your computer was using a key that was widely available online, basically a pirated key. So anybody that was pirating this game, the keylogger would activate, and then it would send information back to this developer, which would hopefully allow them to find out who is basically illegally downloading their game, and allow them to pass that information on to the authorities so that they can go and, I guess, pursue whatever remedies they could from the country from which they're making this video game, which, I didn't even see what country they're in. I don't even know what to say about this, man. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty dirty. I mean, I, it just it's disgusting, and it's a violation of everyone's privacy, and it's such an overreach. I mean, why would you think that it's okay to purposefully put malicious software on someone's computer?
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, that software is notoriously unstable. And how do they know that they're the only ones that can access it and control it?
And that is such a good point. Okay, number one, it requires you to basically it requires elevated permissions to install via Windows user account control. Um, but once it's installed, basically anything has access to it, right? So,
Theoretically.
yeah, theoretically, somebody that knows it's there can now pull information from that, maybe just change a couple things within the FS Labs file folder for this add-on package. And then suddenly they have a keylogger that they didn't even need to install.
Yep.
Oh my god. This
Well, and okay, this may be my own ignorance, but are they really like this? I'm not a big like airplane simulator aficionado. Like, it's not really my bag. But are are they really that worried about millions upon millions of people pirating their game that they're willing to risk their entire reputation of their company over something this silly? Because
so
honestly, like, I at this point I would never play their game, even if I would see it. Like, let's see, I saw some guy streaming it and I thought, man, that game is really cool. Now that I know who they are, there's zero chance I'm ever installing that game on my computer.
so it's interesting because they weren't even intentionally going after all of the people that pirate the game. According to them, they had the IP address and the key, like the key, the activation key that the person used who was actually making these cracks and making the keygen to get these keys out into the public. They were specifically going after him. Okay, so they're going after one person. And in order to do that, they are putting at jeopardy every single one of their users. Like, this is scorched earth policy to the umpteenth degree. Like, I've never heard of something like this.
Yeah, it's not smart.
It's
I mean, it's
it's so dumb. It's so dumb.
like I'm a big fan of supporting developers, and paying for what you play with, um, but these companies have to know that to a certain extent there are going to be people who are going to pirate their game,
Yes,
and it's
absolutely.
gonna happen. It's
It
unfortunate.
is.
Like, I'm not condoning the behavior, but it's at this point, this is gonna happen. That if you come out with a new CD, a music CD, there's going to be a certain population of people who aren't going to pay the $1.99 to download the song off of iTunes or Sound,
Right.
whatever you use. They're gonna just go download it off of Pirate Bay or some website or some program. Right?
Napster. Rest
Napster,
in
yeah.
peace, Napster. I don't even
Seriously.
think they're still around.
Like,
But yeah.
but like, these companies have to know this is happening, and they build that into their losses. They
Right.
know, okay, of the million people playing, probably 5% of them are playing with pirated copies.
Right.
Be thankful for the 95% that are paying, and don't just screw them all over.
Yeah, don't fuck them over.
Yeah,
Like,
I was trying not to be vulgar,
well,
but
no,
I mean, really, come on.
I don't know if we have any kids that listen to this show. Probably not. We've got like 40 listeners. I guess I'm willing to take the risk and say that most of them are probably teens to adults. We'll have to see what happens to them. From what I understand, they've already apologized and they've already removed the offending keylogger. So, like, step one, good job, I guess. But this is something that, people need to be on the lookout for. Like, DRM and intrusive DRM has been something that has been in the news for, God, as long as DRM has been around. I mean, it's been around in the news forever. This level of intrusiveness, though, is something that is new, and I can only hope that other developers and other publishers don't see this and are like, wow, maybe there's more that we can do with our DRM scheme in order to catch the people that are ripping us off, and suddenly they think it's a good idea. And we'll have to see. But man,
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, there's actual games that I haven't played because of the DRM that I legitimately would have bought, because the DRM that they use is so extensive
right?
that I'm just like, it's not worth it. I don't want you like constantly, like a perfect example, SimCity. Like a while ago, it came
Yeah.
out with this thing where you had to be online constantly.
Mm-hmm.
There was no offline mode for this game,
Right.
and it drove me nuts. I was like, I was ready to buy the game because I was excited, but at the same time, I'm like, why do I need to be online for this? I don't plan on playing with other people. I don't plan on doing anything with anyone else. Why do I have to be connected to the internet? Why do I need you looking at my computer every second that I'm playing this game? Not that
Right.
I'm doing anything bad. It just was too much for me,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I didn't play the game.
Absolutely. There's DRM done wrong, and then there are very few and far and few between, but there are examples of DRM done right, or at least humorously. I don't know if you've ever heard of Serious Sam. It was a first-person shooter, and actually, so they released a version. Obviously, they released Serious Sam, and then they had within it a DRM scheme, where if you downloaded a pirated copy of this game, it would let you play for like an hour or two, and it would let you enjoy the experience. And then it would spawn an invincible giant monster that would progressively move faster and faster until it would kill you over and over and over again. And I'm just like, this is great. Like, this is intelligent, this is funny for the people that really do just want to demo the video game, because I think a lot of these people that download copies of video games legitimately do just want to demo it, because that's something that we grew up, like you and I grew up
Oh
being
yeah.
able to do, was demo video games. That was something that was, it just happened. Like, you would buy PSN magazine and you would get a demo disc, and it would have demos for 6 video games on it. You'd throw it in your PlayStation and you play it, and you'd be like, oh, I like this one, I like this one, I don't like this one, and then you'd go and you'd buy those. That doesn't happen anymore. These developers are like, for the most part, read reviews, watch videos, but that's about it. Like, you don't get those demos anymore. So people that were interested in Serious Sam, if they wanted to, they could go download an illegitimate copy, and they could get, a couple hours of the video game experience, and then they would get absolutely crushed repeatedly by this giant monster that only spawns if you have a pirated copy of the game.
Which I think is great. I remember the game. I don't remember the DRM. I remember he was like super snarky, wasn't he? Like he
Yeah,
was
it
always
was
like
kind of like
he's talking
Duke
back at you.
Nukem, kind of like,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
kind
like
of like
funny.
Duke Nukem. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Duke Nukem, but funny. I can agree with that. It was, it was great, and I guess that's really all I have to say on that. We'll move on because we are. Oh my God, we're already at 48 minutes. We have one more
Oh my.
topic that I wanted to cover, and then we will wrap it up. So, Destiny 2, you and I played a little bit of it together. I think you played for maybe 3 or 4 days before you quit.
Yeah, about like a week.
Yeah, I played a little bit longer than that, but I too have quit since then. Probably a little bit before the most recent expansion came out is when I quit. And Destiny 2 has obviously had an extremely rough year. From what I understand, the metrics for this game right now are absolutely terrible. Like, the lowest number of concurrent players since Destiny 1 first released. They have the lowest engagement on Twitch for people streaming the video game. Like, the video game is legitimately struggling. And the team at Bungie are like, well, we need to increase our communication. We need to try to get this back on track. So they release a development roadmap. And I think they released this in December, I want to say, is when they released it. And it had, you know, like kind of 4 sections for patches: 1.12, 1.13, 1.14, 1.20. And they're like, you know, this is kind of what we're aiming for, but some of these might end up getting revised if we can't launch them in time. And so they've released a new development roadmap. And a couple things, of course, have kind of slipped back. And unfortunately, I think 2 of the things that have managed to kind of slip backwards from February until March are 2 of the things that would bring people back to the game. And that is exotic repetition reduction. And for those of you that don't know what that means, Destiny is a game where the most sought after pieces of gear are what we call exotics. And one of the worst things about Destiny is you would constantly get duplicate exotics just over and over and over and over again. And it was so frustrating. And it seems like it's something that would be a really easy fix. I mean, World of Warcraft got this right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you get a legendary in World of Warcraft, and then it's taken off the loot table, and you can't get it again. I mean...
it can't be that hard.
How hard is it to fix this one particular problem? And for some reason, they have to push it back to March 27th. That's super crappy. And then Nightfall Strikes, which are basically, you know, sort of the pinnacle of small group play within Destiny 2. I would say they're kind of the equivalent to Mythic Dungeons in World of Warcraft. You know, in Destiny 1, there were a lot of unique rewards that you can get from Nightfall Strikes. So you weren't just going in there to kill bosses for chance at, you know, a new exotic. Maybe one boss would drop a really nice gun, or another boss would drop a really nice helm. So it added to the replayability of these dungeons, and that is another thing that they have pushed back another month. So,
I mean, it's unfortunate. It's fair to say I didn't give it that much of a chance, but I tried. I just, you know, it really wasn't my cup of tea. Like, yeah. I enjoyed it.
And I think
there
that's
were parts
fair.
of it that I liked, but I never played the first Destiny, so I feel like I kind of there were aspects of it that were really frustrating to me because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, and I would get confused as to where I was supposed to go and what I was supposed to do. Right. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go back to the tried and true games that I know really well. And so for me, it was just dropping back into my comfort level and comfort zone. But definitely they need to do something dramatic because they put too much money into this game to let it do this poorly this early on.
It's so frustrating because, you know, you say you haven't played the first one, but I have played the first one, and we look at sort of the projection that Destiny 2 is on, and it's extremely similar to Destiny 1, where they just keep on fucking shit up. And, you know, some of these mistakes that they're making with Destiny 2, they already made with Destiny 1. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to fix this in Destiny 2 and we're going to make it better. And then they make the same type of mistake. Oh, yeah, my God.
It's unfortunate. I mean...
that's really all that you can say about it.
Like, what are you going to do?
It is. It's ridiculously unfortunate. And it is unfortunate that we are out of time because we are now at the 55-minute mark. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for listening to us prattle on for 55 minutes about video games. We'd love to hear from you down below. Do you have any comments about, you know, Destiny 2? Are you still playing? Maybe you're that, you know, 1 or 2 people that are still playing. You know, DRM. the Mythic Invitational are you guys going to be trying out? Let us know down below. Guys, this has been David and
Pedram.
And thank you so much for listening to this week's Midnight Launch News. We'll talk to you next time.